Hey you, I'm Andy Powell. Welcome to the Allcast Podcast. No topic is off the table. I hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Nomadescapes LLC. Your flooring, demolition, cabinets, concrete, and drywall needs will be expertly handled by Benjamin. If you are in or around the Verde Valley region of Arizona and you need any kind of remodel, reach out to nomadescapesllc@gmail.com for a free estimate and a 15% discount with the code ALLCAST. Mark Nelson. Round two.
Round two it is.
Here we go.
Maybe it's going to be 13. Who knows?
13, 33, who knows? So last time we talked a little bit about you growing up in Africa, about your time as a part of the Rhodesian, not their military, but it's a different group. Was that still funded by the...
No, it was part of the military. It's just the way that it was all... So you had joint... you have a joint chiefs. We had the same thing. And so... what ended up happening there was you had the Army, you had the Air Force, and you had the police. And the police have different roles. There were two divisions of the police. One was brown uniforms. These are the guys, constables, like the people we have in our police cars. And then you had the other guys, and we were part of the other guys. And the other guys, which was support unit and mounted troop and things like that, were responsible for Presidential Guard, parliamentary guards, riot control, and working with the insurgency, against the insurgency, working with the different services we had within the military. So, for example, you had this Special Air Service, the Salute Scouts, Rhodesian Light Infantry, and so on and so forth. And so we kind of bridged a gap between law enforcement and military.
Okay. So whatever.
So it's very unique.
Whatever needed to be done in these other areas.
Yeah. So, example, when they had riots, they would call us in. And so we were trained with, the old-fashioned batons and shields and stuff like that, and we would go in, but we were always covered from behind with personnel carriers with MAGs on them.
Nice.
So, and sometimes some things happened in those riots where you ended up using those weapons. Just because there was one specific riot where behind the front ranks of rioters were a bunch of terrorists, and so they got everybody riled up, and they were pushing them in to the oncoming police force, and they shot them down and started shooting at all of us, and so you can imagine the carnage that resulted.
An MAG stands for what exactly?
Mag 58.
Okay.
Belt-fed machine guns.
Okay. And who's the insurgents started shooting at?
No, they were terrorists, and
Okay.
you can call them insurgents if you want. They were terrorists, but they had their regular fare AK-47s, and so they were just stirring up crowds of people and forcing them to go into these riot situations, and then create an incident. And of course, then you had the international media coming into these places and saying, "Oh, well, look, you massacred all these people," and you know how the international media was, and that included New York Times, the BBC, all of the big, back then, print publications, and the TV news channels that, you had in the United States and in Europe.
The ones that originally set the standard of reporting before they decided to flush it down the toilet.
No, they still flushed it then.
Even back then, huh?
Yeah, no, they flushed it back then. So, for example, there was an area in the capital city called Rotten Row. And Rotten Row was just an industrial area. That's why it was called Rotten Row. I mean, it was stinky, smelly, a lot of manufacturing going on. And there was this big park in the center of this thing. And when the sirens would go off for lunch, because everybody broke for lunch at noon, people would go take a nap in this park under these trees or just laying in the sun, depending on the time of year. And they came through and said, well, look at all these dead bodies.
The media did?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They would take candy and they'd throw candy into trash cans. They would tell kids, strip down, and we're going to put candy over here in these trash cans, and you go ahead and dig for the candy, kind of like when you do a piñata thing, right? And all the candy's on the floor.
That's
well,
ridiculous.
But they put it in trash cans. So then they took pictures of these little black kids, rummaging through trash cans, and the caption is, "Oh, they're starving.
Hmm.
So they were doing this way back when. They were doing this in the 60s, 60s, 70s, 80s. This is not new for the media. It's new for us here.
Yeah.
But this is not what they were doing this crap everywhere.
So they've always been
this way.
Using their platform for
Yeah, they've been using their
for
platforms.
evil.
Exactly. Use their platforms to forward an agenda. And so anytime, I'll give you an example. There was a cross-border operation that our military did. And net result was it was a Chinese-run base camp. Okay, and there were probably, I don't remember what the total body count is. It was in the thousands. But it was a base camp, and it was a training camp, and so we took it out, and it was dropped bombs on it.
Okay.
Sent, it was a classic military operation.
A multi-approach.
Yeah, it was an air-ground operation, and it was the body count was X. It was horrific, and there were a lot of people killed, not from our side, from that side, and the way they did it, that's can be debated as to whether, it was Geneva Convention appropriate or not, but who cares at this point. And so they took this base camp out in Mozambique, all right, and they brought the media in to show the Chinese communist insurgency. And, for example, there was a schoolhouse that was being used to instruct people on how to lay landmines. And so when one of the bombs took out the school part of the schoolhouse,
chain reaction.
The flash, the flash of the explosion etched into the board on the wall, which is a chalkboard, burnt the chalk into the chalkboard with all the directions of how to lay a landmine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there were women and children in the building because they were teaching the women and children how to lay landmines. Well, of course, you can imagine what the international media said. Oh, look, they're slaughtering innocent women and children. Well, look on the wall over there, where the chalkboard is. Because what they would do is they would have the woman carrying the landmines. Because the women always carried packs on their backs, strapped up just like Africans, or if they had things on their heads, and the woman would typically carry the landmines in. And, it was no different from a lot of stuff that you've seen in Afghanistan and Iraq, where you've had women and children involved in an insurgency. I mean, this stuff was happening back then. So what was happening here, our forces here in the United States, though, was nothing new. Mm-hmm. It's been going on for decades around the world. But so the international media comes in, and they say, oh, they took out a refugee village. That's the headlines. So every external raid thereafter, we did like the Israelis, they didn't say anything. That was it. Mm. But that was what our government was trying to do, I guess, is to show the actual amount of Chinese infiltration into Southern Africa. Mm-hmm. And yet Jimmy Carter's out there saying there's no communist troops in Southern Africa.
Yet he knew better.
Well, there were 100,000 Cubans in Angola when he said that.
So I don't know what that...
So basically what happened is when Carter was running for office here in the United States, when he was running against Ford, they turned Southern Africa into an election issue here in the United States to get the African-American vote. So they ginned it up.
Okay.
And so if you go to Carter Library and you research any of this stuff, you'll find where things are being declassified, where Andrew Young, Cyrus Vance, who was his Secretary of State, and Jimmy Carter all admitted to misleading Congress, telling lies to the government in order to get the black vote in the United States. They used conflict down there to win an election here and to gin up all of this stuff.
So right now history is totally repeating itself.
Yeah.
With this the open border stuff.
Open borders, all this reparations stuff in California.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different.
Let's talk about the reparations.
Sure.
What is happening in California? Who is somebody seeking reparations, or is somebody offering reparations?
I've been staying out of it. Apparently, so I may not know 100% of everything that's going on, but apparently Newsom started this. Gavin Newsom started this whole thing, set up this reparations committee.
Go figure.
Yeah, they came up with a number here this last week of, I think it was $1.2 million. I'm just going from what I saw on the news, and that's kind of questionable sometimes. Mm-hmm. But apparently a lot of the people involved, so this reparations committee, that's the number they came up with. Well, a lot of people who want to get this reparations weren't satisfied with that number.
So
they want more.
So who are the people that want reparations, and what do they want reparations for?
Well, see, that's the thing. Who are they? Who are they really? Okay.
Well, surface level, you watch the
surface
news.
level. You watch a hall full of African Americans being talked to about reparations because of slavery and all this kind of stuff in California.
So that's what this is about, is black people wanting reparations for slavery?
That's what that in California is about. And again, I'm not an expert because I've been kind of staying away from that stuff.
But none of those people were alive during slavery.
No.
During, at least not the enslavement of African American people.
No.
And none of the people that are currently alive today were alive back then.
I'm more African American than they are because I was born in Africa.
That's why I say black instead of African American, because you got you, Elon Musk. There's plenty of people that are African American that don't have darker skin. And there's plenty of people from other countries around the world that have darker skin that have nothing to do with Africa. So whatever this political correctness is about using the term African American, well, it's a bunch of crap.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, but that's all part of that whole woke thing, the spiritual warfare that's going on in this country right now.
Yep.
But there's this whole thing about reparations. What set me off was, I'm watching some of the people that are standing up and speaking because they're against the 1.2 because they want millions more per person.
1.2
million per person.
Wait. Reparations of
$1.2 million per person in California was the number that this board supposedly came up with.
For slavery reparations?
Yes. Well, but it's not. Look, it's slavery reparations, that's the start. But then it's lost opportunity and this and all these different things that they factored into this $1.2 million.
So it's Marxism or socialism?
Well, that's the thing.
This is the slope towards socialism.
So that's worse than that. So here's what I see in the parallels here. Okay, so some of these people that get up and they're complaining and doing, they're just like the Chicago mayor who got sworn in over the weekend. They sing the Black National Anthem and they got all the kids.
What's the Black National
Anthem? I
have
no idea. I've never heard of it.
What's the difference?
I don't know.
There's no difference.
I don't know.
There can't be a difference.
Well, I'm watching the news this morning.
That's un-American.
Yeah, but they sang the Black National Anthem in Chicago, and the choir of kids that was singing were doing the Black Power salute while they were singing it. So let me explain that. That's what the communists were doing with the insurgencies in Africa, primarily the Chinese and the Russians. This is on Newsmax this morning.
I'm looking up. I'm looking up the Black National Anthem.
I have no idea what it is. I've never heard it.
I've never even heard of this.
No, they have a Black National Anthem apparently.
I'll read through the lyrics real quick because this is interesting. It's called "Lift Every Voice and Sing." Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise. High as the listening night skies. High as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast brought thy might, Thou who has by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path, we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we meet thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee, shadowed beneath thy hand. May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say that's not the Black National Anthem. The National Anthem is the National Anthem.
I'm just saying that's what they sang when they swore in as mayor. It said this is the Black National Anthem.
Okay, so they're using this wonderful, beautiful song right here to create division. That's what's happening.
Well, yes, but this beyond that. So, the fact that, and I didn't see this. I was listening to Newsmax. I tend to think Newsmax is probably a little less biased than most. Okay, when it comes down to the woke liberal side, but they said specifically at the choir, and I'm sure you can find YouTube of it. The choir singing this had the Black Power salute going while they were singing it. Okay.
Well, like we talked about at the beginning of this, the media can spin it to look however they like.
Sure. But the point is back to the reparations thing, and I digress with the mayor, but it all ties in because what you have here is you have politicians, Newsom, and some other liberal politicians promising these people reparations, right? Well, the Chinese and the Russians, to get the insurgency going in Africa, were promising people the following: you join us, you get the white man's house, you get his bank account, you get his woman, you get his car. And that's how they were ginning things up for the insurgency. So you look at this, because what I saw when some of these people were not happy the 1.2 million that they were supposedly going to get out of the state of California. How they're going to do it, I don't know. It works out to, I don't know, trillions of dollars by the time you get done, because everybody's going to move to California to go get it.
Huh.
And maybe we should build a moat around there. I don't know, but the point is the communist insurgencies in Africa used the same type of carrot dangling in order to get votes, in order to get recruits, in order to do these things. And some of these people that are protesting, I can look at them, I can see them, I can hear the language, and this is a Marxist, communist indoctrination going on here.
Yeah.
And what's happening is, you want to destroy this country? You do it from the inside.
Exactly.
You let us do it to ourselves.
Well, they're doing a dang good job.
And this is exactly what it is. And it's being sponsored by the communist Chinese.
So what I know to be the heart and the soul of the spirit of America wouldn't do this. The people that are true Americans, true patriots, they wouldn't fall in line with this kind of crap. And I know there's hundreds of thousands, there's millions of Americans out there that won't do that.
Right.
So my question, when I see this type of stuff, is like, even the woke stuff, the gender stuff, the rainbow flag stuff. By the way, the gays don't own the rainbow. Mm-mm. Nobody owns the rainbow. It's God's rainbow. Nope. So find a new flag.
Yep.
But a lot of it, I wonder, where does this all come from? And the word that comes to mind is entitlement. There's some sense of entitlement that these people believe that they are owed, that they deserve, that they don't have to work for whatever it is that they believe they are owed. So why in today's society are so many young people, why do they feel entitled? Any idea?
So when I came here in 1982, I could not relate to people my own age at all because of entitlement. I remember sitting on the beach, first time I sat on a beach in Laguna Beach, and listening to these people my age that were in junior colleges talking, and it was, yeah, dude, so I just got to take like one class a semester, and I can live at home, and he pays for my car and pays for my insurance, so I just come down to the beach here and just smoke and drink, and, that's cool. My dad, my mom doesn't care. So this is this is 82, right?
So this is not something new.
This is just decades in the making.
It's just more obvious. It's come to the surface now.
I think what it is, I think they realize now that they're running out of time because people are starting to wise up.
Yeah, last time we talked, you said that they're 60 years into a 100-year...
The Chinese have a 100-year plan. Yeah, they're 60 years into it with regards to what's happening with like this entitlement and things like that. And the reason this is so much out in your face right now is I think, and we'll see what happens, but I believe I'm hearing things. I'm looking at Budweiser, for example, at the stock, at the analysts. And
do you mean Bud Light?
Yeah, Budweiser, but Bud Light, the actual beer. But you look at the actual stock of that company.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tumbling, and it's not tumbling just because of the Q Plus ads they ran, but then in the response to defend their position, they got the Q Pluses upset at them. So they got the non Q Plus community upset, and they got the Q Plus community upset, and and it's so there comes a point where they've been trying to to satisfy or trying to placate every single little person that has a complaint or a bitch or a gripe, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
But so now they're getting caught up in it. And so I think what's happening with all of this stuff, the people pushing these ideologies are starting to realize that the American people are starting to wake up. So now they want to get it done faster.
Yeah. So they push a little bit harder.
Push harder, get it in your face.
Yeah.
Blame anybody or call anybody that speaks up against it or racist or this or that. You know, I have been called a racist just because I was white and born in Africa in the 60s.
I was going to ask, is it because you're African?
Yeah, because I'm a white guy. I'm a white guy born in Africa. See,
so
I'm a racist.
How does that
by default?
So the person asking that question, how does that logic even make sense? Do you know?
No.
How does it make sense that you're a racist because you're white and from Africa? That makes zero sense to me.
But that's the message that's being transmitted.
Let's clear something up real quick. There's a lot of interpretations, of misguided interpretations of what is racism or what is racist. I'm going to say what I know racism to be, and anything that's outside of that, people have kind of spun it over the years to become something that's like frowned upon. Overused, yeah. So racism is when a person believes that another group of people that has a different skin color or a different set of genealogy is inferior.
Correct.
Period. That's it.
Correct.
It's not stereotypes. Racial stereotypes are saying like, oh, you get pulled over because you're black. That's a stereotype. That is not racism. That's a racial stereotype that's built upon which may be unjust for sure. The track record of arrest history in that area, which is that's unjust. Maybe because of racism, but there's a difference between racism and stereotypes. So,
and the thing about it is, and so if you want to talk about racism in Africa, look, it was a colony, right? So let's explain. That's a little bit of a history lesson. So, white people went to Africa, and the Portuguese went out there and with Vasco da Gama, when he was circumnavigating the world, and they set up a port in Cape Town. It was to replenish the ships coming from Europe. And then, as wars in Europe are won and lost, people assume the colonies of the defeated. So with South Africa, for example, started out to, and I'm not talking about the local people that were there, the Africans at that time, and they weren't the crowd that's currently there. It was the Hottentots and the Bushmen and people like that were there at the time, and they were brought in and helped do stuff, grow crops, do things for these Portuguese sailors, the sailings, the replenishing stations and stuff. And so you have a war in Europe, right? And so Portugal is on the losing side. So guess what? The Dutch move in because they assume the colonial rights. Well, then there's another war, and the Dutch lose, and then the Brits move in, right? And this is the story of colonies in Africa. Then the Germans lose a war, and then their colonies are stripped. I mean, it's like musical chairs with colonies, okay? And in those colonies, there was obviously racism. And I can tell you in South Africa, that's what apartheid was. Apartheid means separate. Okay, that's what the translation of apartheid is, separate. And so there was an element of the Dutch population in South Africa that during the First World War, Second World War, sided with the Germans, with the Nazis, okay? And white supremacy and things like that. That was there. That's how apartheid came about in South Africa. The difference is what they were doing in South Africa with separate chairs and separate this and separate that, we were doing here in the United States at the same time.
Segregation.
But South Africa passed a law saying you have to be separate. So that's apartheid. And because they actually passed a law, that's what made it evil. Even though we were doing the same thing here in the United States. Exactly the same thing. They were lynching people here in the United States. Same thing was happening there. And so...
Still evil, though.
Sure, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, so they actually made a law, I think it was in the 1950s, middle 50s, and they made a law, so all of a sudden, Now, because it's law, it's bad. But over here, because it's not law, it's not bad.
Okay, so
right? We were just doing the same thing. We just to make a law about it.
The way that society responds,
bingo,
is whether if it's a law, then it's bad.
Yeah, you got. I mean, it's a law. You got to follow the law, right?
Right.
That's it. But if it's just people, society coming up with whatever their own personal policies are, or whatever their societal goals are, it's not a law. It's not being legislated. It's not on the books. So there was this element there, and they were Old Testament-based, Calvinist, Dutch, hardcore, it was called Dutch Reformed, hardcore, Bible-punching people, and they believed that people of color, based on what they read in the Bible, that people of color were supposed to be slaves.
So they only read the Old Testament.
Yeah, right. That's what they went with, right?
Okay.
And so, but they rose to prominence in the 50s and were able to take over the country politically, even though it wasn't the majority of the country. Now, people don't realize that there were civil wars fought in South Africa called the Boer War, okay? And you had colonies within South Africa that it was a British colony that didn't like what the Dutch were doing, and the Dutch, the English really didn't care until diamonds were found in Kimberley and gold was found in where Johannesburg is today. Then all of a sudden they were interested in this Dutch land that these Dutch settlers had moved out from Cape Town and just over the centuries just trekked up further north. And all of a sudden, because it's an English colony, now the English went into the gold mines and the diamond mines, because before they couldn't care less. Well, so anyway, they had the Boer War. There were two of them. And the Boer War was a fight between the Dutch settlers and the British. Oh, and by the way, the colonies, the states within South Africa that were British, majority of British population living there, they fought each other. And just like in America, the English got their what's handed to them by these Boer soldiers. People believe that concentration camps were invented by the Nazis. The British invented them in South Africa. The only way they could beat the Dutch, and they did something similar here, back in the War of Independence, they went out and they took the women and the children and they put them in camps with no food, no sanitation, and they burned, scorched earth policy. They burned all these farms, all of these ranches, all their houses down, scorched earth policy. And these women and children died in these camps in huge numbers from dysentery and all those different diseases that you get when you're living in that kind of squalor. The British did that. The British military did that to the Dutch women and children. That was the first time you saw concentration camps where it wasn't prisoners of war. It was women and children, and the Brits did that to the Dutch. And that's how they broke the will of the Boers, because the Boers saw all their families dying in these camps. And they burnt the farms to the ground, all this kind of stuff. Well, there was a second Boer War after that, And so the point is you had the English and the Dutch fighting, all the way up to, I think it was 1890 something. Okay. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, but those Boers, those also were the ones that a large percentage of those Boers were the ones that were the hard-line, Old Testament Dutch Reformed church guys. And they honestly believed, just like you and I believe in what a wonderful God we have in Jesus, they believed they were right just as strongly as we believe in what we believe in.
Yeah.
And so that's how they ran their society and they ran their lives.
I went through that those mental gymnastics when I went to Iraq, thinking like, okay, well, these people were born here, and they believe 100% that their belief system is correct. They were raised in it, and I believe the exact same way. I was raised in it, and I believe that my God is the only God. And those two things clashed, and that sent me down a rabbit trail, to say the least. But
yeah. And you see, and that's the thing. So these guys in the 50s came to prominence, and then they passed the law, and they took control of the government for some decades. And that's where apartheid came from. And I don't know if you know this, but I believe it was 1986. I'm sure it was 86. Ronald Reagan signed into law a law that prevented apartheid in the United States. And you know what we're doing in the United States right now?
Apartheid?
We are teaching kids.
Yeah, through critical race theory.
Through critical race theory, we are now practicing apartheid in the United States, which was legislated and signed into law in 1986 that you cannot do this.
So there's two things. It's written into law that we cannot do this. And in order for people to combat that, they need to know, hey, this was already written into law.
Yeah,
my
1986.
generations younger than me.
No, they don't teach history.
No idea, no clue that that's even a law. Hey, you can't indoctrinate through apartheid, or you can't teach it or preach it. Thing number two, the way that they language these things in legislation allows for them to do so many things. It's loopholes via language.
Absolutely.
That's all
it's weasel words.
Exactly. Weasel words. I like that.
I like the word weasel words because the people that are writing these laws are weasels.
That's right. That's right.
You know, and the thing about it is there may be people listening to this podcast call me a racist because of what we just said. I'm not a racist.
Well, maybe it's because you're African.
Maybe because I'm African. I have never in my life hired somebody based on the color of anything, right?
Yeah.
My father and my grandfather taught me as a little kid, we all bleed the same color.
That's right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we all have a role in our societies.
We all need to eat. We all need to breathe. We all need to drink water.
Right. And then, I'll give you an example. My wife went out in 1986, and I told her about how easy it was to take advantage of the African people, the black African people, the people living there. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do your best to educate them, but when you're outnumbered, like in South Africa, I think it was probably outnumbered 5-1, meaning African Americans, true African,
like
not African Americans,
blacks
just
to
African,
whites.
black Africans. South Africa outnumbered the whites probably 5-1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in Rhodesia, I think it was 12-1.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and so those white societies were the ones that were paying the taxes to build the schools. Okay, and all the black people getting free education. The white kids, the white families were paying for it, for their kids to go to school, and through the tax base, health care for the black people and education for the black people. But when you have a small group of people shouldering that burden, you could build a school a day and still not keep up with how it needed to happen. And one of the things about this was after the First World War, South Africa asked the British, because they were self-governing, they asked the British for true independence. Okay? And the British said no, because we need the cheap labor to pay the war debt to the United States. Okay, and I just gave you a 10,000-foot view of that. Well, after the Second World War, same thing. All of these colonies, us included, Rhodesia at that point was Southern Rhodesia, we said, hey, we've got all these people here that we've been educating, they're wonderful, we want to integrate them into our society, and the British said, no, we got to pay off this war debt to the United States. We need the cheap labor.
Wow.
That's what the progression was. The Brits needed the cheap labor to pay the war debts that they incurred for both the First and Second World War. But no one talks about that. So we were all denied, including these wonderful black people, denied true independence because the Brits had a war debt to pay.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't teach that, see?
Oh, no. It's really unfortunate when somebody else can make that kind of a decision for other people.
Right. And then so when in the very early 60s, Harold Wilson, the Labour government in England, got in and they just decided to kick the colonies apart and say, okay, go for it, go take your independence. But they wouldn't let us have it because we were the breadbasket of Africa at the time. And they wanted that revenue from Rhodesia. It was Southern Rhodesia, Northern Rhodesia, and Nyasaland, which is today Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Okay, it was the breadbasket of Africa. And when we asked for independence, they wouldn't give it to us, so we took it in 1965. Then we became racists. Then this whole history, all these hundreds of years of history, came down on top of us. Oh, we're racist. We're a white minority rule. We're a white this. We're a white that. You know, it was amazing. If you just read the freaking history of what happens, it's totally opposite to everything that they teach you, everything you hear in the media. So they've been doing this propaganda stuff, this media, been doing this propaganda stuff since the 60s.
Yeah.
Well, look at Vietnam.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it comes
Jane
out.
Fonda.
Yeah. And it comes out way later that it was started from a false flag event. It's crazy. When it comes to the reparations in Africa, when you were there, who was offering these things and what was being offered?
Well,
you mentioned earlier it was the white man's house, the white man's whatever. So,
yeah, so it wasn't reparations per se. They never used the word reparations. It was a case of, if you hear the language of this reparations bill in California and you talk about lost opportunity and housing, I mean, there's some interesting language in there. But what it was is they would incite people. Remember, you have tribes, right? So the tribes don't always get on anyway, just like the Middle East, right? The tribes don't get on. They've been fighting with each other for centuries.
Yeah.
Okay, and at this point, the tribes were no longer fighting each other, right? They're being educated. A lot of them have come into the church, all that kind of stuff. So all those old tribal things had disappeared from 100 years ago. Well, if I remember correctly, there was a constitution proposed in 1960 in the United Nations where it was a gradual handover to majority rule in Rhodesia, right, over a period of time. So I think it was 1960 or 61 when this thing was proposed. General Assembly of the United Nations approved it. Who do you think disapproved it? UN Security Council. Who's on the Security Council? The communists. They could not win if you created a strong black African middle class in Africa. There's no way you could take those countries over using communism because those people have too much to lose, just like we have here. Too much to lose. So the first thing they did, they vetoed it.
So they used the law to keep them oppressed.
Yeah. So the communists, the Chinese and Russians, were involved in vetoing anything that was approved in the United Nations at the Security Council level to do with Southern Africa because they wanted the natural resources, they wanted the sea lanes, they wanted all the things that make that part of the world, because back then the Suez Canal wasn't the way it is today.
Yeah, the resources. They wanted
it was all about minerals,
access.
precious metals, strategic minerals, so on and so forth. And South Africa and Rhodesia and Zambia abound in those metals, chrome and uranium and all these different things. And a lot of these are byproducts of the gold mines. Just saying. So that was their prize. That's what they wanted. So anytime anything was that you couldn't get through the British government because it was a colony that then went to the United Nations to have the United Nations intervene, got vetoed by the communists. And that was in the 60s. So this whole issue of the belts and roads and bricks and roads and all these different initiatives that they've had, the Chinese have had all these years, here we sit here and say, oh, Xi is the one who started this. No, it was going on in the 60s. And so once they were able to veto any of these types of declarations for independence and to integrate society in that, there were a number of talks held by our government, because even though we at this point had self-rule, we were still a colony, right? Part of the British Empire.
And you're talking about Americans.
No, I'm talking about Rhodesia.
Rhodesians,
right,
okay.
Back then in Africa. So then they had these talks on, HMS Fearless, all these other things, where our government was trying to negotiate with the British government independence and integrate society. And the British didn't want it because Rhodesia was a cash cow for them.
Yeah.
It was just like America was a cash cow for the Brits. And why did you guys have a little bit of a war? Because the stuff you were being taxed on stuff never left the country, right?
Yeah.
And the suppression, and so this is basically the same thing was going on there. The only difference is there were 5 million black people and 300,000 white people, something like that.
Okay.
So it was very easy then to turn that into a racial issue.
Yeah.
So our government then, and we had a council of chiefs, by the way, because we had the tribal chiefs. The Council of Chiefs sat in Parliament with the politicians. I mean, they didn't have no representation. They had a Council of Chiefs. Council of Chiefs sat in Parliament. And so we decided to declare independence in 1965. Immediately sanctions, England, America, all through the Security Council. All through Security Council.
Man.
So the whole thing was a setup. This is why I say there's a 100-year war. Whole thing was a setup to get control of all these minerals and resources by the communists.
That's crazy.
People don't want to hear that.
Yeah. Well,
and they've rewritten that history, by the way. That history has been rewritten, just like they rewriting history here in the United States.
So if somebody's not lucky enough to talk to somebody like you who knows this and who was there before, where would somebody find this information?
Good luck. There's not much you're going to find on it.
Yeah.
Because it's been sanitized by Google and all these other
sanitized.
Yeah, sanitized.
That's a
right.
weasel word right there.
Oh, it's another weasel word. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I pulled up something here about California because I want to speak a little bit more educated on what this reparation stuff is.
But you see the parallels here, and just the parallel here was the way they got. The only way they could get the black Africans to get involved in insurgency was to promise them exactly like what's happening here in California.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, well, they started this with Black Lives Matter thing, saying it's the people that started Black Lives Matter
are Marxists,
Marxist people, and what they did was they say, hey, your race matters, right? But what they're really doing is they're using that to create division, to create a movement, to make money off of the division.
Off the people they supposedly represent.
That they say matter, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, your life matters, but your wallet doesn't, so...
No, your wallet's out.
So that's the thing. Basically, these people aren't people that support Black Lives Matter movement, may or may not understand that, but I wouldn't call them insurgents, but they are a part of a movement. They're being deceived into a movement that is not what it seems.
See, but if you look at it's not because they're armed insurgents. They're doing it the same thing. They're just not doing it with guns. In this case, they had to do it in guns in Africa. Okay, they used fire. I mean, they took them into training camps. They got trained by either Rush, depending if it was on the west side or the east side, was either Russian or Chinese influenced. Training and this, that, and everything else.
Now you need less guns and more psychological manipulation and emotional manipulation.
But you see, back then they had to do it by the barrel of the gun. Now they don't have to because they got the media.
And a weak, passive people.
And you got a bunch of people that don't know history.
Yeah.
You got the media, you got social media, and you got a bunch of feckless politicians that all they're concerned about is being globalists and how much money they can make when they get out of office, or never get out of office and still make lots of money.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. It's about breaking this country back up into tribes. Breaking this country back up into tribes. So the parallels are, it's the housing. You've been living in these inner cities, and this $1.2 million. There's a formula on how they got to $1.2 million, which actually we should break down at some point and look at.
We can do that.
And how did they get to 1.2? What were the factors that got to 1.2 million?
Yeah. Well, let me read this thing real quick.
Sure.
It's from a place called calmatters.org. And the headline is California Reparations Task Force aims at more than dollars, seeks policies to prevent harm. So this is just like what you were saying. This is literally just, here, let's put this into law to keep these people in a particular position, and it's all racially based.
Yes.
Meanwhile, they're teaching critical race theory in schools. Dude, this is nuts. Okay, so end legalized slavery in California is what it says.
Yeah. Did you know we had slavery in California?
There's a lot
I'm
of
just
roads.
saying.
There's a lot of roads we could go down. In this.
But my point is end legalized slavery.
Yeah.
So what's their definition?
It doesn't say, which is clever because it just likes to use the weasel words to redirect the mind into a certain idea.
Watch the shiny object.
Yeah, exactly. So then it says, adopt a Black Studies school curriculum that shows racism's devastating results. Stop devaluing black businesses. Who's devaluing black businesses?
I have no idea.
I don't know either.
They fall under minority contracting with the government and everything else. I mean, they have a leg up. They get leg up where the white guy couldn't.
I don't know enough about this to even know.
So I know that because in my business career, I work with minority businesses, both Hispanic and everything else. And they do have an advantage in getting government contracts and all these other things. I mean, they don't get it doesn't get just handed to them. I mean, they've got to be within, the range, the low and the high range numbers.
Some criteria.
Yeah. Oh, yes. There's criteria. Like in the military contracts, it's called FARC, F-A-R-C. There's a formula where for every hour, for every man placed, it's like 40. I think it's 41 to 44% is the range that every contract has to be priced in. But so if they come in at 40, if they come in at the high end, they would actually get the contract because they're minority owned.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they have an advantage.
Yeah.
But it's not just is it on a plate. If they're in the range, they get the preference.
So then when it says seeks policies to prevent harm and they want more than dollars, basically, if you have to tout out, hey, we want more than just money, then you're probably full of crap and you probably just want money, but here's the reasons we're going to give you to say that's not the case. So, end legalized slavery in California. Didn't know we had that.
No,
adopt a Black Studies school curriculum that shows racism's devastating results. Well, that sounds pretty polarizing. If you want less racist people, don't focus on racism. Focus on equality. I mean, yeah, maybe it's important to
thought we settled this when Obama was elected president. I thought we settled the race issue.
I don't know
Just
about
saying. That was supposed to be the case, but I don't know.
Stop devaluing black businesses. I have
no idea what that means.
I don't know of any instance that's taking place
other
than Black Lives Matter riots that are destroying
the
very
businesses in those inner cities
that they're claiming that matter and that they want to protect. Exactly. So then it says there are some of the dozens of recommendations California's first in the nation task force. Oh, we're first in the nation on reparations put into its 485-page report. Members say these policy recommendations are not getting the attention that monetary discussions are, even though these policy ideas might have as big an impact. This is the actual meat of what we're really trying to do, said Assembly Member Reggie Jones Sawyer, a Democrat representing Los Angeles who is also a task force member. Ultimately, 99% of these recommendations will be the ones probably that we'll be able to enact or to budget for a lot easier than compensation. In fact, reparations is not just financial compensation, but it's to stop the ongoing harms of racial chattel slavery. What? If anybody out there is listening and you know more about this and could speak to this, please email me at theallcastinbox@gmail.com because this is confusing and I don't see. If you have examples, actual real examples of this stuff, send it in because this I've never seen any examples of this where I live.
It's indoctrination.
It is.
It's indoctrination of the population.
Well, I don't want to read through this whole thing. It's
400-something pages. Why can't they just have a simple one-page mission statement? Just saying.
Do they have that?
I don't know.
Oh, let's see.
But if they did, maybe people would understand it, be more sympathetic to it.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that you do in the private sector, you have an executive summary. So where's the executive summary?
Okay, here we go. The purpose of the task force is, 1, to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. Mm-hmm. Looks like you're included in that, buddy.
Well, yeah, I have the wrong skin color, though.
But you're African American, though.
Yeah, I got it.
Don't you count? It says it right here.
Well, yeah, but you remember one thing. Apparently, only African Americans are black.
Huh. Okay, so number 2 says to recommend appropriate ways to educate the California public of the task force's findings. So basically, they're going to develop reparation proposals, and then they're going to educate the public about that.
They've already come out with the numbers, 1.2 million.
To recommend, number 3 is to recommend appropriate remedies in consideration of their findings. No, I don't like this. How did they come up with 1.2 million? Why 1.2? That's a lot of money
per person. Not per family.
So then,
per person.
So if they do this, if they go through with this and they pay all Black African Americans $1.2 million per person in the state of California for slavery. So
but
what about
it encompasses property values too, all the way back to 200 years ago.
It factors those in?
Yeah.
So what about those people who get this reparations? What about their kids? Do they get reparations too?
Is it generational?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Is it a never-ending thing?
Or is this going to actually be like the lid on the jar?
Okay, one lump sum, here we go, have at it.
Now
it's never going to be that because government doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Inside a California proposal to pay $1.2 million in reparations to Black Americans. This is from thehill.com. The California Reparations Task Force will vote on a series of proposals this weekend that could see descendants of slavery living in the state each receive up to $1.2 million. Let's see.
Each.
Yeah. But if you look at, I guess I don't know the numbers, so I can't speak to it.
It's in the trillions.
I'm referring to Native American people.
Well, yeah, let's talk about the Native Americans then too.
Well, because
who's next?
So here's the thing. So they do receive benefits. They do receive reparations.
Sure, it's called casinos.
Well, no. In addition to that, like if you can prove your blood is this.
No, I get it. I get it.
They'll pay for college, all kinds of stuff. I just don't know the numbers.
Yeah,
is it equivalent to $1.2 million? I don't know.
I know. But the point is what they're doing here is. So who's going to pay these reparations?
Taxpayers, right?
Right. So how are they going to pay it in California? Property taxes?
I have no idea.
Income tax?
Probably
sales tax?
Green vehicle tax.
How are they going to pay for
Electric
it? I mean,
vehicle taxes.
Newsom's running away from this number, by the way. This 1.2 came out. Newsom said, we can't do that. And so now all of a sudden Newsom, just like the Bud Light thing, Newsom's now getting it from this side, the reparations side, as well as from the side that says, what do you think you're doing with reparations?
Wow.
So he's now caught in the middle, and he's trying to run from it. I suspect Newsom was going to use this as a national platform to run for president. That's what I suspect.
Come on.
Well, why is it in California? Why do you propose it?
Because everything that's dumb is in California.
Yeah,
almost.
But he proposed it. And there's all the talk about him running for president.
Okay, let me answer that again. Everything is dumb in California. That's not necessarily the case because California seems to be the port for these ideas and idealisms.
And it heads east.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And New York is the other port, I think.
Yeah,
for some reason.
they got The thing is the methodology that's the same is how do you split society up and indoctrinate society that one side's bad and the other side's not. And that's exactly what the communists do.
Yeah.
They foment revolution.
Yeah.
So what they're doing here in the United States is we're in a civil war right now. People don't realize it.
Different kind of war.
It's just not going bang bang.
Mm-hmm.
There's you don't have the North and the South shooting at each other. You have basically got ethnic groups, all of it, white, black, Hispanic, whatever, looking over. They're so busy looking over their shoulders to see what's coming next, that they've divided this country up. And we will never, ever get over that if we don't get back to the core fundamental principles of the Constitution of the United States.
I agree.
End of story. And they don't want that because it works.
That's right. And the difference between people today and people back then when the Constitution was actually written is that people today, not across the board, but most of us, the younger generation, don't have a personal constitution.
Right.
You don't have an identity, a security of your own identity of yourself.
What did people come over here to do? They came over here to get away from tyranny.
Yes.
And now we're practicing it.
We I don't know.
Well, I'm talking about
we're living within it.
We're dealing with it. We're dealing with a weaponized bunch of government agencies.
Yes.
Look at this Durham report that comes out.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and nobody goes to jail. That's tyranny.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not what the dictionary. You see, the problem is we're caught up on the dictionary definition of these things. we're not connecting dots.
Well, it's a when is it bad enough? When is it bad? Is it when you don't have food? Is it when you don't have the ability to buy food?
Yeah.
Is it when there's people coming to your door to try and take your guns at gunpoint?
Well, let's talk about that. You bring that up.
Yeah.
Guns, okay? So, we lived in a society where you had a license for a gun. Okay?
In Rhodesia?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you were also limited, mostly because of sanctions and things like that, to X number of bullets per year that you could purchase. And you went in, you had an allocation. It was set by I forget who it was. It was either the government or the local police. Based on, okay, you live on a ranch, right? Cattle ranch, right? And you've got 29,000 acres and 5,000 head of cattle. Well, yeah, so you get more ammunition than the guy who's sitting in town who's just using it for self-defense or going occasionally target shooting or hunting. So I remember my household, my dad was limited to 100 rounds, right, of 22. Okay, whatever. Cattle ranchers may be limited to pick a number. I don't know. It was an arrangement that was with them and when they went to buy their ammunition. Mm-hmm. And when you bought the ammunition, it was registered, okay? So you could only buy that many in a year. Now, they made exceptions. So, for example, if you joined a rifle team, like all the high schools had rifle club, and they were all shooting 22s. So if you were on a rifle club and you got the appropriate letter from the principal of the high school, they would increase the allocation because it was a legitimate activity of the school. All right?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
In the school, it was a legitimate activity to shoot guns.
Team. Yeah.
It's excellent.
Yeah, every Friday afternoon. And we would go down to the military base to do it. So it's kind of interesting. We used their ranges. Or we used the police range. Mm-hmm. And so the interesting thing about this is that gun and that ammunition was registered, right? And so you could only have so many, or there was no exceptions. Now, if somebody could give you the ammunition, nobody really cared, even though you weren't supposed to. But the gun was allowed to have X number of rounds of ammunition for that gun, be it a handgun or a rifle, in any given year. Done. So they knew about your gun and they knew about the ammunition you were buying. And that went on all the way through the war years, right up until 1980. And remember I told you that the seven of us were pulled out and were sworn to contravention Official Secrets Act when we started destroying stuff? Brett and I actually destroyed those records, the Central Civilian Firearms Registry. We also destroyed the military inventory listing of all of what, the FNs, of belt-fed machine guns, everything that we had in the military. Those records were destroyed. Now you say, why am I bringing this up? For 30 years, Mugabe, who was the president at the time when he came in, for 30 years he ran amnesties to try to get these weapons in. And that's the only thing that stopped outright ethnic cleansing in that country, because they didn't know who had what guns, because those records were destroyed. And 30 years of amnesties they ran.
After the destruction of those registries?
Well, yeah, we destroyed the registries. They get into power. They go, well, where's the records? Who's got the guns? Well, there weren't any. They were destroyed, right? This is why I had to keep quiet for so long.
Yeah.
And that was just one of the things that Brett and I got involved in. The other guys were involved in other stuff. The point is I'm not taking credit for anything. We were given an order to destroy it. That's what we did. We destroyed it, right? I'm not taking credit for this. But I will tell you this. That order that was given to destroy those records saved millions of people's lives because of that registration. They would have known how much ammunition, who had the guns, and they would have gone door to door.
And taken them
And they
by
would
force.
have used the North Koreans to do it, because that's when they brought the 5th Brigade in 1982 to start implementing, like killing people, taking out the opposition tribes. That's what they would have done. They would have gone door to door.
Wow.
So they didn't know who had the guns.
That's why we can't. Oh man, that's a really good
So
example.
that was genocide averted.
That's yeah.
Because I can guarantee you the first group of people to be taken out would have been the white people.
So then let's look at what's happening in America. State by state, even federally, some people are trying to pass laws for gun registry. Well, you can, and voluntarily, I guess, Visa or MasterCard or some credit card
Yeah,
companies.
that's not happening anymore. They stopped that.
Did they?
Yeah, the codes got pulled.
They were volunteering to offer the information up to the government.
Yeah, which would have
fighting.
violated the 14th Amendment and all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
Equal protection and all that kind of
So
stuff.
that got snuffed out.
Yeah, it's not. No, I wouldn't say it's snuffed out. It's just it's on the shelf. Okay, it's not. None of this stuff ever gets snuffed out. It's on the shelf.
I was being hopeful.
Yeah, but you see, in this case that I was just talking about, it was the communist Chinese running this operation. So you know what the end goal would have been had they known who had the guns.
That's still the case today in our country.
Sure.
It's the Chinese that are influencing all of these changes right now, these policy changes.
But that's what I'm saying. You see the parallels?
Yeah.
That one they did through the barrel of a gun.
Yeah.
This one they're doing with weasel words.
Yeah.
And fragmenting our society, which they did with the barrel of the gun. I mean, they would go, you'd get one faction go and take out a village of a different tribe. And then all of a sudden now you got the factions fighting each other. Well, that's what they're doing. We're fighting each other. We're just doing it with this.
With our mouths.
Social media and the newspapers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, imagine that. Imagine had those records. That in my mind, that was the only order that should have been given and the only records that should have been destroyed. That and the personnel records of people who could have been victimized by the incoming government. But as far as the rest of the atrocities and all the things that those people committed, that should have been front and center. They should have been tried for crimes against humanity, and they didn't. Jimmy Carter put him into power. Jimmy Carter threatened South Africa with sanctions if they didn't shut down our border.
Apartheid. Wow. So when you were a kid, you said the first time you got shot at, you were 12? 12 years old. And what was the situation?
Me and a buddy, the country was, even then, I mean, so remember, back up and I'll get to that. So remember I said there were two divisions of the police, right? There was the brown uniform guys, we call them brown boots, and there were the black guys, the black boots. We wore camo and, different fatigues and things, and they wore a police uniform, right? And so even during this whole period of turmoil, that uniform branch of the police department was never armed. Oh, yeah, because they had us. The whole point being is the country, and most of those police officers were black. And the government of the country did not want a single civilian to be afraid of walk, no matter who they were, what was going on, what war was happening. They did not want a citizen of that country, of any race, to be afraid of walking up to a uniformed police officer and asking for help or whatever. They had methods of dealing with insurgencies, and they had methods of dealing with riots, and that was us. Okay, different side. But so back to this, I just want to mention that because every member of that society, didn't matter what color they were, had no problem walking up to a police officer, and most of whom were black. And yet it was racist, and somehow this was all racist. So back to this thing. So we go fishing, and during that period of time, even though things were heating up, it was still a very safe place to be, right? Because the insurgencies were coming in from outside the country, they were in the infancy and things like that. And so we just went fishing at this lake. We were sitting on the lake edge, and the wall, it's a reservoir. It's not really a lake. I can't even remember how big it was. I just remember the AK rounds hit the water in front of us. They didn't know how to aim, but it was about 400 yards away, probably, where they started shooting at us. But these men, we're just sitting on the bank, they're fishing, two kids fishing, and the next thing, this group of people come out of the timber line, and we're going, what's this? And the next thing you know, you got bullets hitting the water, and then you start hearing the reports. And it's like, we take off running, and these rounds are going over our heads. We're just two white kids. I don't even remember how many of them were. There was a bunch of them. And they were shooting AKs.
Yeah.
So that was my first introduction to being shot at. And I made sure that would never happen again.
So since they were so far away, you guys ran away.
Well,
no problem.
Yeah. I mean, the rounds hit the water in front of us first.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, maybe they were 300-400 yards away. I don't know exactly. I mean, we were kids.
But you guys got away.
Yeah, we got out of the place. We had our bikes stashed, and we just got on bikes and rode. Got on the road and took off. But point is that changed me because I would never put myself in that position again. Never.
What did you do to avoid being put in that position?
I was armed all the time.
There you go. Yeah.
Because at that point, that was about 1972. That's when things started heating up. That's when the Portuguese colonies in Angola and Mozambique, the Portuguese government, there was a coup in the Portuguese government, and they said, "Oh, we don't want the colonies anymore." Well, the Russians walked right into Angola, and the Chinese walked right into Mozambique. That was it. They were already in Tanzania, so you had Tanzania with the Chinese, Mozambique down here, Angola down here, and South Africa down here. So South Africa was going to get it. We were going to get it from three sides at that point, And so, Tanzania and Mozambique were Chinese spheres of influence, and Angola and Zambia, which all had common borders, became Russian sphere of influence. But there were no communist troops in Africa. Just saying.
Yeah.
So things started to snowball from that point, and so all the kids, our dads were doing, even my dad at 50, he was a reserve. He was actually Senator Chief Chirao, who was the head of the tribal council. He was a senator. Now, think about this, but we didn't have people in the government that were black, right? Senator Chief Chirao was the highest person on the communist hit list because he was the one that commanded the authority of all the different tribal chiefs nationwide, of all the different tribes nationwide. And he was the first one they wanted to take out, and the highest priority target they had, both sides. Didn't matter where his tribal allegiances may lie. My dad was part of his personal protection, 30 days in, 30 days out. And meanwhile, he's trying to raise us, run his business, and they're doing this 30-day call-up, 30 days in, 30 days out. He was doing that when he was still 50 years old. Mm-hmm. It's so as from about 1972, the innocence was gone. And that's when they started burning down farms and killing people, and that's when we had to really start firing up the military and getting all these emergency systems in place. And this, I'm trying to remember, it wasn't called the Joint Chiefs. I'm trying to remember what it was called, but it was equivalent to this Joint Chiefs, where you had, I think his name was General Walls, Lieutenant General Walls. He was in charge of all aspects of police, military, everything else. And so essentially they were calling the shots at that point.
How old were you when you destroyed the gun registry?
I was 20, not quite 20.
Yeah, and the other guys that were in your...
They were all the same age.
No, I was going to ask about what were they doing at that time? You said they were getting into some other stuff.
So we got broken up into details, okay, and so Brett and I were doing personnel, and we did these. We were removing any information. That's a classic military order. Oh, you got to take anything out of the file that could compromise a person from any operation, but you can't read it. What?
And how do you know it's going to compromise somebody?
Well, because if this incoming government had access to these records, it says, hey, Mark Nelson was involved in this external operation that happened to take out one of your base camps, right. you'd get whacked.
Right. But
so we had to remove that info. We had to remove any references from personnel records.
Yeah, but how do you find the references if you're not allowed to read the
That's my
records?
point.
Okay.
That's my point. You got to remove all these references to anything that could compromise somebody, but you can't read it.
Okay, so that's their way of letting you read it.
Yeah. And also remember, you got sworn. Contravention of Official Secrets Act, so you can't talk about it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so that's what Brett and I were doing. And we were also destroying written physical records of personnel, but also the massacres, the mission massacres, they went into one of the missions. They killed all the nuns and the priests and all the school teachers and that, and they absconded with like 600 kids. Okay, little kids, yeah, age 10 or lower. All right, abducted them, took them to foreign countries, indoctrinated them, sent them back as commissars.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, now they're they're doing that here, but they're not removing the kids or
just
killing the
indoctrinating
teachers.
them.
Yeah, they're just providing the curriculum.
That's right.
That does it right in front of your face.
The curriculum you were just reading about, for example.
So,
So we destroyed evidence of massacres. The other guys were destroying, like Kevin and them, they were destroying the ballistics. Not ballistics, the, what's the word? I'm not talking about ballistics, but I got a brain fart going on. When the labs that the police use, crime labs, forensics, the forensics.
Forensics.
They were destroying all the forensic evidence, which included ballistic reports of weapons that were used in these massacres that were known to be in the possession of the people that were coming into power. And so we were just all basically sanitizing every single thing. That special branch, because that's who it was. Special branch was basically the equivalent of the CIA, NSA, all of those agencies put together. Because we had the CID, which is Criminal Investigation Department, but then you had Special Branch, and those are the ones you didn't want to be playing with. And so they were basically the central depository of all this information and a lot of these raids into foreign countries and who participated and this, that, and all this other stuff. So all it was sanitized.
So if you take a look at your experience with not only with guns but with destroying the registry and preventing a genocide because
I didn't prevent a genocide. That was the only order that we should have followed. That one.
Well, no, I'm saying that you did follow that order of destroying the gun registry, and the reason that the genocide was prevented was because that information was unavailable.
No, they didn't know who had it, and they didn't know who had all the military weapons.
Right.
Because you could buy as they were disbanding our military. I mean, half our military went down to South Africa and joined the South African military to fight the Cubans in Angola.
So factoring that point in, though, if you take the fact that you destroyed a gun registry and prevented genocide or prevented these people from basically being highlighted as gun owners or whatever, if you look at America today, what's happening is if you look at the media's report on guns, most of it is negative. Most of it's like, okay, school shooter here, school shooter there, mass killings, all this stuff. We should, and then they use that. Politicians use that to try and say, hey, we need to put in gun control. We need to have a registry. We need to have restrictions. We need to have limited mag capacities. But then there's all of these other stories that don't get reported on in the mainstream that are people who are stopping these killings from happening.
Good guy with a gun.
Good guys with a gun. Stopping bad guys with a gun. Because if it boils down to it and somebody's in there with a gun trying to kill people, what do? You call a good guy with a gun.
Right.
That's it. So if there's already a bunch of good guys sitting in the restaurant who carry guns, it's going to be a lot less likely. And if you look at the data, the stats on like Chicago, New York, these places that have extremely strict regulations.
And look at the murder rates.
The murder rates, the violence, it's way higher. But that's because law-abiding citizens aren't allowed to carry guns as easily. So,
and you got a Marine sitting there charged with secondary murder or something
for stopping somebody
from hurting people on the subway.
Yeah,
who has a rap sheet of like 40 crimes. I mean,
it's so stupid.
Yeah.
So this is the obvious intentional demise of America.
Yeah, it's this is all about how do we divide this society in America into tribes.
Right. So
then how do we control the tribes?
That's their goal.
That's
right?
the goal.
I would say it's probably the Chinese Communist Party and the globalists, or some combination of the two.
Do you know the difference between globalism and communism? Why don't you Google it and read it? Because I think people here would like to hear the difference between globalism and communism. Just read the goal of globalism. Or the definition of globalism from the Merriam-Webster dictionary.
All right, let's see.
I'll find it too.
We've got Oxford Languages Dictionary definition on Google. Globalism, the operation or planning of economic and foreign policy on a global basis.
What do communists do?
So, let's see.
There's a better definition of it, but...
Communism is a political theory derived from Karl Marx, advocating for class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. I don't. Well, that last piece I don't think that's true.
There's more to it than that. The point is, if you take the two premises of communism and globalism, okay, what does communism do? It's a central plan, right? Government controls everything. They decide who does what, where. What did you just read about globalism?
That's the same thing. Do you mean communism?
No. What did you just read about globalism?
Oh, that's what
It's
it
a
is.
central
What
plan,
you just
planning on a
described.
global basis. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
just on a global basis versus a country
Yeah,
by
so
country
it's
basis.
government control
It's government control of everything.
on a large.
And it's not government control, it's
largest.
members of the government.
Right, which are people telling
which
other
are
people.
certain people
Telling
in
oth-
certain places telling other people what to do.
Yes.
I.e. Politburo.
The what?
The Politburos.
What's that?
You know what a Politburo is?
No. Political bureaucracy? Is that what Politburo
China has a
is?
Politburo. Who do you think sits at the top of the Politburo?
Is that political
Xi.
bureaucracy?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
That's
called
what I was
Politburo.
asking.
I mean, they have Politburo. South Africa, you read the local newspapers, they call each other comrade.
So then as the people that are being divided up and that they're trying to segregate and create tribal wars and all this stuff between Americans or people that live in the world, what are those people supposed to do to stop this?
Okay? Hold that thought. Definition of Politburo. The principal policymaking committee in the former Soviet Union, founded in 1917. China's got one right now.
Mm-hmm.
Russia's got one. It's called Putin. You know, he still has a Politburo. South Africa has one. They all have this group of people, pick a number, 10, 12, 15, that control everything.
Yeah.
Okay, that's globalism.
Right.
It's no different. Globalism is just a play on words on communism, in that you have a number of companies, a number of individuals control everything. They do it on a global basis. Doesn't have anything to do with the country's own economies.
Yeah. So this
and
is
what's good for those countries.
This is the World Economic Forum.
Bingo.
This is all that stuff.
Yep. And the World Economic Forum is just as communist as Xi is.
This is the Bilderberg Group.
That's it.
This is all of these
All of
things.
them. All of those, whatever they were, that everybody thought were conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
They're not conspiracy theories.
We were right. Sorry.
Well, but look, go back to First World War. Okay? You talk about Bilderberg Group and the World Economic Forum and that. Let's talk about the Rothschilds.
Yeah.
You had the German Rothschilds and the English Rothschilds. Who paid for the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand to start the First World War?
Who?
The German Rothschilds. And what did the Rothschilds produce? Munitions. Hello.
War profiteering, both sides.
Bingo. You know, globalism means we all go. We fighting. What are we fighting wars in all these different countries? Why? It's got nothing to do with us. Why are we there?
To achieve someone else's goal of domination.
Does it work?
Of regions.
Exactly.
Well, it sometimes, not in Afghanistan, not in Iraq.
Well, every time we get involved, we seem to kind of step on our own feet.
Yeah.
That's just because of the politicians, not because our military. Our military is the best in the world and always will be.
Well, that's the thing. If you look at the people controlling power versus those being controlled by power, it's always going to be the people, well, hopefully not always, but the people in power are generally the ones that are screwing stuff up and just want more power.
Yeah.
And that is the entire basis for all of these struggles, these conflicts, is the achieving more power. They just want more and more.
Yeah. And there's one thing out of it that we've left out of it. They've all walked away from God.
Yeah.
They've walked away from
That's
the
right.
Bible.
That's right.
They've forsaken everything for power.
Yeah.
And I just find it interesting, out of all of the stuff we've been talking about, you look at places like Iran and China where Christianity is growing. And I mean, they're persecuted just like the Jews were persecuted.
Yeah.
But Christianity is growing in these countries that are so oppressive because they're finding something. Because we as a society, have walked away from the core fundamentals.
Yeah. Everything that this country was built on
Right.
was those principles, those ideas,
Right.
those beliefs, really, and yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, and so when you start looking at communism and the track of communism in Africa, it was done through the barrel of the gun, okay? And so people don't understand the difference between the barrel of the gun and what they're doing today with social media, TikTok, all these different versions of information swapping, information technology. It's the same thing. It's just no one's pulling a trigger.
Yeah.
But they are pulling a trigger.
Well, except people committing suicide from these things.
Well, look at fentanyl.
Yeah, man. So going back to my question, we were...
Sorry.
No, that's okay. There's just so many issues that are interconnected.
Sure.
It's hard to pick one to...
Right.
But as we face these types of things in America, what are we the people supposed to do in the face of these massive powers trying to separate us, when right now it doesn't look like a gun is really going to solve the problem except to prevent a local issue?
I really don't believe that it's going to come down to me pointing a gun at a cop, right? Because a cop got ordered to come to my door and get my gun. I don't think it's ever going to come down to that.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
I hope you're right.
Well, it may happen a couple of times, but it's going to end very badly for the government.
Yeah.
And whoever the agency is that they can convince or manipulate
Well, that's the thing.
to come to my door.
Especially in our county. Good luck convincing the cops to come to other people's doors and try and take their guns. There's not a lot of cops that I know that would be willing to do that, even if it's for like a lot of money.
Well, do the math, okay? 1% of the population of this country serves in the military. Right?
Well, they took an oath to do that job because they want to protect what we have, not because they want to take away what we have.
So let's do the math. 1% of our population serves in the military, okay, over whatever period of time. So that's what, I don't know, 3 million people, thereabouts. Then go back every enlistment period and add however many more that may be that have actually served this country in a military role of some kind. Okay? They swore an oath to defend this Constitution, not swearing an oath to a president or a party. Mm-hmm. Okay? There was a report brought out, I saw it on AmmoLand. It was about the BATF had scanned firearms records, and there's a Freedom of Information Act that got the number out, and there was this number banted around about 910 million. 910 million records of firearms transactions scanned, okay? And everybody was up in arms. Oh, they're not supposed to be storing this information. Oh, they're not supposed to be doing this. Yeah, they're not. Law says they shouldn't be doing it. But what's the underlying message to that? Are you telling me there's 910 million guns in this country, and that's the ones they know about? If I was the BATF, I would be peeing my pants right now.
Well, that's why they're trying to extract more control of these situations, like the stupid pistol brace thing. They can't write that into law. They can't make a policy that outlaws something that
retroactively.
Yeah, no. That's so stupid.
But that's my point. My point is okay. So let's just say that 910 million records they scanned reflects 910 million guns, okay, of any kind. That's the ones they know about. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't know what the numbers that they don't know about. Probably about the same.
I bet it's more that they don't know about.
Right. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it was the Winchester 4440 handed down by great-grandpa. I mean, you got all these guns, right? And how are they possibly going to take all these guns away, and how is it going to possibly end well for them? It's not.
Well, that's why they're doing it a different way.
But that's why I say I don't think it's going to be a shooting war.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. You'd probably lose that one.
They would lose that one.
Yeah. So that's what I said.
But the problem that we have in this country is we have no moral authority anymore. The minute they put those troops around the Capitol building after that January 6th supposed insurrection, and they put all those troops around the Capitol building, and every time they throw fences up. How do we go to China or Russia or one of these tin pot dictator countries and say, you can't do that? And they say, well, you put troops in your streets around the Capitol building, you threw fences up. We have no moral authority anymore to do anything. So they've destroyed the moral authority of this country. Okay? Because it used to be we were the shining beacon of light.
Yeah.
Yeah? Now we have no moral authority.
Yeah.
And so you take the moral authority away, you destroy the Constitution. And that's what we've got to watch.
So one thing where we messed up, we as Americans have messed up, and I don't believe it's too late. I think we're right on the edge of it being too late, but it's not too late. We have messed up by assuming that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, all these things are set in stone. But they are only set in stone so much as we choose to uphold them on an individual level.
Exactly.
Because we have left that authority to the authorities who
and
are
the
abusing.
Constitution was not set up for the authorities.
It was set up to prevent tyranny by authority.
Right.
We are the authority as the American people.
Right, and the Constitution, one of the basic premises of the Constitution was exactly that. It was designed to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority, or the rule of the mob, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And what are we doing? We got the mob ruling right now. The problem is the mob's about this big. The mob's a
Teeny
fraction
tiny.
of the society, but they got 100% of the megaphone.
That's it.
And they got all the political, talking heads behind them, and the media
And the money.
And the money. They're getting money left and right, and it doesn't matter whether it's the LBGTQ alphabet soup. It doesn't matter. Black Lives Matter. They have this megaphone, and it's very loud right now.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening, the reason we're seeing this accelerate as much as it is right now, is because they know that time's limited.
Yeah.
Because people have had enough.
Yep.
And I can see it. I can look at Bud Light. Look at what's happened to the stock.
Yeah, that's a good example.
People have had enough.
Yeah.
Look at Disney. People have had enough.
See, that's where they messed up, is by trying to, like, if I was doing all this stuff and I was going to start taking things over, I would have done it, but I wouldn't have pushed the trans stuff on the kids. That's where they screwed up.
Yep.
That's what lit the fire, I think.
But I was at a meeting with some people, and we were talking about school board stuff. And it was very interesting because I think it was, I'm trying to remember, it was 2015 or so. About 2015, it was a fraction of 1% of the kids in schools, just grades in general, were confused about whether they're boys or girls, whatever else. Right now it's 14%. So they've gone from a fraction of a percent to 14% in less than a decade. So, and these things go exponentially. So where are we going to be in the next decade if we don't stop this?
Depends on how much we feed those ideas or allow those
Exactly.
ideas to be fed.
Where will we be in the next decade? It's just kind of like fentanyl. They make the fentanyl, they ship it over to the Mexican cartels. Cartels distribute it into the United States. Who's the primary target of the fentanyl? Young kids. Why is that? Because those are military-age people. You want to dismantle the United States military, you've got the best technology, but if you can't have people, you don't have people to operate the technology because you've lowered your standards, because you're not meeting your recruiting goals, you think that's not a war plan?
Yeah.
I mean, that's been talked about up in the Pentagon a lot. They've been talking about this fentanyl thing for 10 years up there. About this is one of the ways you destroy the United States military. Fentanyl. You just make get the youth to a point where you can't put them into these positions. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you this, I've been working with addiction for a long time. Meaning if my own foster kids that are addicts. And if you hear of the death as one, you need to multiply it. Because the way it's reported on death certificates, heart attack, because he died of a heart attack. The fact the heart attack was induced by fentanyl
or COVID
is not on the death certificate.
Yep.
But COVID was put on the death certificate.
Yeah, because it got them points and money.
Because it got them points and money. But the fentanyl, they put down heart attack. They put down suicide. They put down liver failure. They put down whatever it is, but they don't put the contributing cause, what caused that heart attack.
I bet it's the same as fentanyl as it is for the vaccine.
Sure.
People that are dying of heart failure from the vaccines.
Mm-hmm. I've never had blood clots in my life. And I had all these blood clots because of COVID. I've never had a problem with blood clots. I was a borderline hemophiliac, for gosh sakes.
Did you get the vaccine?
Yeah. 7 months off the vaccine, and guess what? I get COVID and I got blood clots. Both shoulders, below the knee, and they're big. They're long ones. They're not like little clots. These things are big, long things like worms.
This is this is, oh man, Aaron Crownable was talking about that.
Both my brachial veins were 100% blocked.
Wow.
Yeah. I had IVs going into places. I didn't know I had veins in my arms. You should have seen what my arms looked like. They were getting ready to go in my neck.
Wow.
So, yes. So
they're reporting it incorrectly.
Correct.
We're just about at an hour and a half. We'll wrap this thing up in the next 5-10 minutes or so.
So entirely up to you.
Right on. Well, we talked about reparations a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Need to get some more clarity on that stuff because
this is a hot subject right now.
It doesn't make sense. Like
no.
It goes back to that equality of effort versus equality of outcome. People are looking and saying, well, there's not equality of outcome, therefore there's not equality, which is not the case.
No.
And maybe all this is easy for me to say because I'm a white male American who owns land, but I don't really think that that's the real issue, and I think it's being polarized as an issue. Because if you're an American, doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't matter if you immigrated here. Everybody who is an American, except the Native Americans, immigrated to America.
For a reason.
For a reason, yeah. And
I don't see lines of people trying to get out.
Not yet, you don't.
No, not yet. But even if we did, where would we go?
That's the thing, yeah. I have no idea.
Exactly. So we have to fight for what we've got.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find it interesting how many people sit there and they want to do the Patriot thing. But when it comes to doing the Patriot thing, you can't find them.
What do you mean?
Well, people sit there and they talk tough about, this and that, and we need to do this and we need to do that, and
as Americans or as patriots, is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, because they're concerned about the direction of the country, and they talk about it.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to doing it, they're nowhere to be found.
That's right.
Because it's too hard to do it.
Well, people don't want to let go of the comfort, cush life that they have, which is probably where a lot of this entitlement comes from.
But we don't have to. We just got to get our butts off the couch and vote.
Yeah. That's not just it, though, because it's not just voting, as you can tell with this Kerry Lake election.
Well, it has a lot to do with it.
It has a lot to do with it, but once it happened, like, okay, Kerry Lake got the majority votes for the election. She didn't win the election officially according to whatever it is, Maricopa County, because they screwed with stuff. And I watched all this.
No,
I watched all the court
proceedings.
But my point is that it's not just a vote, because people did get off their butts and voted, and that didn't work. So then what? Then you have to get up and you have to go stand by the ballot boxes and make sure that people aren't dumping in all these extra ballots that don't belong to any actual Americans. But that takes risk, because that risk means that
that's the patriot stuff I was talking about.
That's the thing. Exactly. That's real.
But let me go back to that vote. Okay? There are countries in the world where people, let's use Iraq, for example.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Where they got, 90% of the people went out and voted in that first election because they'd never had the right to vote before.
Yep.
And they were threatened with the insurgency of death and all sorts, but they still went and voted.
And it's not like you can do it in secret, because in that country you have to use
They dyed your finger.
They have to, you get finger dye.
Right. So the point being is we have people in America that live here that like to complain about this country, that never get off the butts and go and vote.
They got no frame of reference. They don't have any.
But so the point is, if you got countries where people risk their lives to vote, and we're sitting on a couch watching the Super Bowl or watching whatever sporting event it is, it's on voting day. The problem is we've got to get everybody out to vote, because then they can't cheat that way. They can't cheat that big.
Yep.
We all know where I stand, where you stand. If the other side legitimately wins, they legitimately win, but they're not legitimately winning.
Right.
The Democrats are controlling ballots. Republicans are chasing votes. Well, it doesn't matter how many votes you chase if you don't control the ballots. Until the Republican Party wakes up, the Republican Party has taken a knee in this country over the last 20 years. And that knee, a big knee they took, was the day that the Gang of Eight, which just came out, the Gang of Eight got briefed on the Trump investigation, and there was nothing there. And then Comey gets out and testifies and says, we did this and did this, and nobody held the FBI or any of the agencies responsible. The Congress of the United States took a knee. and including the Republican Party. They took a knee. And because they took that knee, this crowd thinks they can do anything they want. And they're doing anything they want.
Yeah. It comes back to that division.
Yeah.
Because you have the Republican Party, which not every single one of those congressmen in that party is taking a knee.
I know one from here that's not.
For sure. And he's doing great things for our district. But it's really terrible because it's the culture of the Capitol and what it is to be a politician or a lifelong politician. Mm-hmm. It becomes something else other than representing the people. Mm-hmm. It becomes self-serving, becomes power-seeking, and as a party, the Republicans, I would say they're not unified. No,
there's a civil war going on within that party.
Yeah,
they don't stand for the very values they espouse. And one of the last things I wanted to say, so this whole thing that happened in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, they had an election in '78. A black man won that election. His name was Bishop Abel Muzorewa. He was very centrist, very pro-West. Okay. Well, the Chinese and the Russians put pressure on the United Nations to have another election. So they invalidated that election, even though it was a free and fair election with multiple parties. They then had a second election where they let all the insurgents into the country, had the United Nations peacekeeping forces in there to supposedly protect the insurgents, and the peacekeeping forces go ferrying these insurgents with their weapons into voting points. Okay? The reason I'm saying this is, you can play with a vote, you can play with a count, or you can use intimidation. It's the same thing. You get the desired result, right? So what ends up happening is this guy Mugabe gets in, right? And the sad thing about all of this is it happened right in front of everyone's eyes. And it was allowed to happen. That's exactly what's happening here. Again, I get back to they're not using the barrel of a gun. But it's the same thing. They alter the vote through the barrel of the gun. Here they're manipulating the vote.
Yeah.
To get the same means.
Yeah.
The end means is the same.
Yeah.
And that's the parallel I want to make here, is because what we saw going on there, while it was done through the barrel of the gun, it was done through intimidation and atrocities and everything else. It's been the same things happening here. We're just not using a gun and we're not killing people. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing.
Yeah. It is. That's really unfortunate. We got to brainstorm, figure out a way to redirect this stuff.
Yeah. It's just very, very sad because my entire family that's alive, that's here, and all the people that came from that part of the world that are here in Prescott Valley even, are saying, what are they doing? We've seen this before.
Yeah, Americans haven't, which is the problem.
Yeah.
Which is why we're having this conversation. Help get people to understand, hopefully, a little bit of what's gone on in other places and see, like, it's coming down the pipe here. If we don't do something, it's gonna change. But let's take a minute to just recognize the things we're grateful for.
Sure.
We have the Constitution. We have the Bill of Rights. We have the Declaration of Independence. We have our own willpower and our ability to choose to uphold our own personal Constitution, what we believe in, whether it's spiritually, morally, or within the law. Remember that the law is only something that somebody wrote down for someone else to follow. Mm-hmm. And that includes the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But if we aren't embracing that thing on an individual level, then it's going to be torn away by those who seek power and those who control money. So we really need to make sure that we do our own part as individuals and uphold that and be grateful enough for your freedom. Recognize the freedoms that you have. Be grateful for them and maintain them. Grateful enough to act. Grateful enough to put aside your cush life to act, to retain those freedoms, because we want our children and their children to be able to experience this degree of freedom as well.
And if I may add, listen to people who've been through this before, who've experienced this, who have come to the United States, who love this country. Listen to what they have to say.
Yeah. Seek that perspective.
Right.
Well, thanks a lot, Mark. We'll do this again sometime.